right, well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim Rubenstein, and I feel most honoured to have been invited to facilitate this really important webinar today. I'm sitting on Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and in fact, not only am I sitting, but I'm being looked after by my partner who's brought me in a turmeric tea. So that really does make this a very yarn-style event, and I'm really, as I said, honoured and privileged as he holds up the yes. Oh, that was so perfectly positioned as it was, so everyone could continue to see the yes, but alas, I'm not going to waste any more time. You can see before you the participants in this webinar, and I've just got a little bit of housekeeping before we go into the essence of it. First of all, as I mentioned, I'm sitting on Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and anyone who would like to share with everybody in this webinar room where you are coming from, you're encouraged to put where you are in the chat, so we can see the breadth and depth of this wonderful country that we're all privileged and nurtured by. This webinar is going to be recorded, so we just wanted to make sure everyone is aware of that. And if I don't think you can be seen, so in essence, all of the presenters have agreed to that, and so that will make this available beyond those of us who have had the privilege of the live participation. We'd ask that any questions that you might have, you put into the chat function, and Sam and Shelley from the Consumer Action, you can see them both on your screens, will be monitoring the chat function for us. And Shelley is also going to be launching a poll for all of you to participate in. And I understand, and I'm going to leave that to Shelley to manage, so I won't go into any further detail about that. But hopefully, yes, I've just seen it on mine. There is a poll that has just come up in relation to the likelihood of your voting. So and I can't vote, so I'm going to just close that. But I think it's very obvious in relation to my T-shirt and, of course, what I'm about to say, that I'm certainly going to be voting yes. But that is the purpose of today, is an educational one to share with all of you information for each and every person to be able to make their own informed decision. And so that is the added value of something like this webinar, to provide you with further information to be able to answer questions. Just briefly, I think my role here, not only as a facilitator and as an ally, is because of my expertise as a constitutional and citizenship law person, and it's that context that I'm going to start today with just a few minutes in relation to a brief history of the Voice to Parliament. Once I have completed that, I hope that will lead to either the answering or the instigation of questions. Then we have a keynote presentation from Steph Tonkin. And then after Steph's presentation, and I'll be introducing each of the speakers as they speak, we will have the remainder of our panelists who you can see here, Laura Thompson, Uncle Rod Jackson, and Sheree Lowe, presenting each of them on why they have come to the position they have in relation to this referendum. So that's the structure. And then, of course, we'll be really keen to hear from you and to answer any questions that you have in the remaining time that we have. So in the few minutes that I have before that I've got allocated under this wonderful run sheet that I've been provided, I'm going to speak about the Voice to Parliament and the history of it. Now, the history of it, of course, goes back thousands and thousands of years in relation to recognition of the first peoples of Australia. And in essence, of course, that history is over 60,000 years old. And that is the basis, of course, upon which this desire for recognition in Australia's constitution is reflecting, and the need to actually have recognition in the Australian Constitution is because this very small document, which I carry with me everywhere, the Australian Constitution, does not recognise Indigenous Australians. Indeed, Indigenous Australians were not involved in the writing of this Constitution, and perhaps in the question time, which I'll come back to, we may have time to come back to. But not only were Indigenous Australians not involved, but there were specific provisions and mechanisms to exclude Indigenous Australians in terms of the notions of participation, citizenship and equality that I've been writing about for many years. Indeed, Indigenous Australians are such a litmus test of the distinction between the status, the formal status of citizenship, and the actual lived experience of equality of membership in the Australian community. But specific to the need for a change to the Australian Constitution, a constitution that was drafted in the 1890s, can actually go back to obviously post-colonisation when this document was developed, where Indigenous Australians on the ground at the turn of the century and in the early 1920s were seeking a voice to the colonial governing authorities. So this is not a new idea in any sense. William Cooper is one example, a Yorta Yorta man who specifically developed a petition to go to the king that was rejected in the sense that it wasn't actually passed by elders, by the Australian authorities to the authorities of the day. So there is a long history before the more recent history, which is the specific history to this particular formulation. In 2007, we can sort of start as a starting point where we see a bipartisan approach, both sides of government deciding that recognition was absolutely essential in the Australian Constitution. And I think that's a really important point, the bipartisan beginning, and in fact, the longevity of that bipartisanship until December of last year. But with that spirit of bipartisanship, there were various bodies and different reports that have been written along the way, including in 2015, a Reconciliation Council co-chaired that led to a series of dialogues around the country, constitutional conventions of Indigenous communities throughout Australia. And I really want to stress here that these constitutional conventions of Indigenous communities engaging with this document, doing a 101 constitutional law class on this document, and then saying, if we want recognition, how do we want recognition to appear? This has been formulated through Indigenous communities and engagement with this document. I've written about how that is an inspiration to all non-Indigenous Australians to engage with this document, a document that was written by white bearded men in the 1890s, that in my view is not fit for purpose for the 21st and 22nd century and is in need of change. And this first change on recognition of Indigenous Australians is such an important one in making it fit for purpose. But what is particularly ingenious is that it's Indigenous Australians who gathered around the country, which ultimately concluded with the Uluru Dialogue in 2017, where we saw the development of the poetic and beautiful Uluru Statement from the Heart, which has as its message, voice, treaty, truth, voice and Makarrata. And it's the voice element that is the referendum question that we're being asked on the 14th of October. It is about a decision that the best way to be able to recognise Indigenous Australians as First Nations of this country is not just purely through a symbolic statement, but a practice as well, the practice of setting up a new institution in this Constitution, a voice to Parliament and the Executive to be able to make representations in relation to laws affecting Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander peoples. I'm more than happy to come back further to discuss the ingenuity, the conservatism, the clarity of this constitutional provision, and in ways that I believe enhance the quality of democracy for all of Australians. But I think now is the time for me to pass over to Steph Tonkin to be able to give her a few minutes. Now, in introducing Steph, she's asked me to shorten what I was given, but the most important thing is to say that Steph is the CEO of the Consumer Action Law Centre and a staunch ally of First Nations, both in her personal and professional life. And with that, I'll hand over to you, Steph.
Thank you, Kim. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we're all meeting on today. And today, Rod and I are on Wurundjeri lands of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and everyone here on the call today. Thank you for being here. I'm honoured to be called an ally, and I'm honoured to be here to hear from an incredible panel of respected Aboriginal leaders within their respective communities who continue to advocate and work towards recognition and justice for First Nations people. To me, that's the point of this referendum, to give a permanent voice to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on matters, policies and decisions that affect them, their families and community. To me, it simply makes sense to listen and learn from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples with such richly diverse backgrounds. Successful examples exist internationally, and importantly, a yes vote will be a meaningful step forward in reconciliation in this country. In fact, as Kim just reflected, this is in sharp contrast to how the Constitution was written and in the Constitution's exclusion of Indigenous Australians. Consumer Action Law Centre is strongly supporting the Yes campaign because, in the same way, the voice enshrines our government and our whole country listening to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on the matters that impact them and their community. We are sharpening our focus on putting community, our clients, consumers at the centre of design, decisions and strategy. We do this out of respect, but also collaboration like this always leads to better understanding and lasting solutions. In a similar vein, I'm really happy to see cross-sector support, including really big business genuinely supporting the Yes campaign. Our fabulous First Nations staff, Jackie and Shelley, are driving important First Nations partnership, engagement and policy work to solve Victorian First Nations consumer and debt issues. Through their partnership work, Jackie and Shelley reflect that there is widespread support among their communities for the voice because, in their words, our voices matter and together we can make a difference. So they're just a few brief reflections, but I want to say thank you to VACCHO for leading the organising and delivery of this important webinar, specifically Sam and our wonderful Shelley worked hard to pull this together at a really important time in the campaign. Thank you to each speaker, Laura Thompson, Rod Jackson, Sheree Lowe and Professor Kim Rubenstein. And thank you all for coming in and listening with open hearts and minds today. I'll get out of the way so you can hear from our wonderful panel. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Steph. And we'll obviously be looking forward to hearing your responses to some of the questions as well later on. So now we are at the point of hearing from our three speakers, and I think I'll perhaps do a sort of an order which is consistent with my image on the screen. So Steph, seeing you're sitting with Rod Jackson, Uncle Rod, are you happy to start off?
Certainly. Thanks, Kim. Yes.
That's my pleasure. So I will do a brief intro, seeing I'm sure there are people all around the country who'd just like to hear a little bit more. But Uncle Rod is a proud Palawa and Sherbal man with a breadth of senior leadership experience and knowledge that bridges government and Aboriginal businesses. He has many, many past roles, including General Manager Operations of TTT Lines MV Spirit of Tasmania, Port of Portland Chief Executive Officer and Chief Executive of 4 Aboriginal organisations, being Gunditjmara, Victorian Aboriginal Health Service, and the Wathaurong and Willambang services. Rod was a previous member of Aboriginal Economic Development Board, NATRO, VACCHO, Respect Victoria, Food Bank. I think I better stop, but there is a very long list of amazing organisations. So we're going to hear from you, Rod, as to your views on this referendum now. Thanks very much, Rod.
Thanks, Kim. I'd like to start off by acknowledging country, and we're meeting today on Wurundjeri land, and I reside in Djab Wurrung country. So I'd like to acknowledge elders past, present, and emerging, and everyone on the line today. As you would imagine, I'm very much a staunch yes supporter. You know, I've reflected on some of my upbringing, and one of the things that I wanted to really talk about today was, you know, the pyramid of life that we have. If you haven't got a house, you haven't got food on the table, you haven't got health, you haven't got education. You know, we're a long way from being resilient. And I think to the referendum, to me, also means that we all need to have a good look in the mirror at where we want to go in the future, and understand that 3% of Aboriginal people, with the number of Aboriginal people, so 97% non-Aboriginal people need to come together to make the referendum and the Constitution recognition come to fruition. We've got many powers in listening, and the policies around that are very well known. And I'll share my thoughts, particularly on Noel Pearson's advocacy around the love of country, and the shared long history that we've got of land and sea. And that's been part of my vocation in life too, running shipping companies and ports, and also with CEO of Aboriginal organisations. So we've got a romantic heart around how we go to the next step. And as you said, Kim, around the Uluru Statement from the Heart is really part of the central dialogue with this. I'm going to reflect on where I was brought up in Tasmania and Devonport on the northwest coast. And Sir Joseph Lyons, at the time in 1932, 1938, was the Prime Minister of this country. And he supported what First Nations and wanted to bring some of this that we're talking about to fruition way back then. And I later was involved with the Mayor's Fund, and that was through royalties from books that were produced by the late Dame Enid Lyons. And those funds then went to underprivileged people, etc. And also I reflect on that because my mother's name was Enid as well. So, but Dame Enid Lyons, and the Home Hill, which is located in Devonport, is very significant to culture across the land, as the residents of Sir Joseph and Lady Dame Enid Lyons. So we really have got a long history of things that have happened. You know, in the 24th Prime Minister of this country, Paul Keating, met at Redfern and supported ATSIC. And then by the time 25th Prime Minister arrived, John Howard dismantled ATSIC. You know, so we've got to look at how those pathways happened. And some people say that they're worried about us taking the land off them. You know, Mabo decisions has not meant that we've taken land off people, you know, the farmers. We've respected all those transitions. The referendum, to me, as you said, is around the particularly in Victoria, where we've got treaty as well, and Uruk. You know, we've really got large stepping stones going on around the country. And I think that the voice to Parliament is really something that we've got to support. I noticed even today that some of the no campaigners have changed to be yes campaigners, you know, so the 3 letters are coming out. The 2 letters, the NO means nothing and it'll take us nowhere. So I think we've got to reflect on those sort of conversations to make sure that we've got a positive spin on the outcomes. As you said, Kim, the Uluru, the Constitution doesn't recognise people that have been here for 65,000 years, you know, and the millennium needs to change, and we need to focus on that. Our destination means that we are all one in Australia, and we should be united to make sure that these vital decisions come to fruition. And voting yes is a safe and responsible pathway for bridging the gap. So I think that we've really got to think about Aboriginal people are the beacon of life for this country. You know, we had in Melbourne at the weekend, we had 102,000 people at the AFL the AFL game, and the welcome to country was well acknowledged. And the other people that have used the 2 letters were silenced by it. So I think that's really remarkable for this country to ignore some of that. You know, we may only consider what the voting will be, but I hope on the 14th of October we all take the right pathway and look to the future. The yes vote is I think is gaining a lot of momentum, and I really think that the politicians of the past. Some people say politicians should just keep out of this discussion at the minute, and I acknowledge that too, because I think there's mistruths and misunderstandings being taken to the breadth of not where we want to be. So I thank you for having the opportunity to listen to me today. I've got, I'm quite passionate about this whole subject. I've been the last few days at the Elders conference here in Melbourne with Auntie Pat Anderson for dinner the other night, and Auntie Jill Gallagher, and many distinguished people that really highlight our life together. Dr. Vicky Cousins spoke about language. Her dad was on my boards at Wurrung going back many years ago, and they're really passionate about we need to change the whole atmosphere and speak in language and recognise where we want to be. So as you said, we want to change the norm into real acceptance, like as in New Zealand, Canada, and across many parts of the world. Thanks, Kim, for the opportunity to have a few words. Thank you. Thank you,
Uncle Rod. I'm sure we'll come back to some of those points that you've raised already, but without further ado, I'm going to introduce Laura Thompson. Laura is a proud Gunditjmara woman and co-founder and CEO of the wonderful clothes that she's wearing, Clothing the Gaps, an Aboriginal streetwear brand and social enterprise, although her image has just dropped from me, so we'll just double check that she hangs around. If not, Sheree, get ready to follow in. But I'll introduce Laura, and if she hasn't arrived back, we'll also introduce you, Sheree. So Clothing the Gaps sell merch with the message and led the campaign to free the flag. Laura is also the founder and designer of the brand Koori Circle, with a background also in Aboriginal health and bearing a role for being a role model rather for young women in community. Laura is paving the way forward in Aboriginal rights and getting people to wear their values and have a conversation. So welcome, Laura, and thank you very much for participating. I think we're having a bit of trouble with your image here, but if we see you in a second, we'll hear from you next. Give you another minute or so, and then I'm going to introduce Sheree. So while Laura is managing her internet, I'm also delighted to introduce Sheree Lowe. Sheree is a descendant of the Djab Wurrung and Gunditjmara people living on Wurrung country in regional Victoria. Growing up Aboriginal, her family and community has shaped her life and identity as a proud Aboriginal woman, living in a world of diverse life experiences. Like many, her identity and experiences have been and continue to be impacted by the legacy of colonisation. She spent her personal and professional life living, supporting and advocating for Aboriginal people to be seen and heard across a range of different injustices, including the justice, education, health and wellbeing areas. Sheree has experience in working in the community, government and private, also in the private sector. She's currently the Executive Director at the Victorian Aboriginal Community Controlled Health Organisation, VACCHO, who's very generously hosting this, and leads the Balit Durn Durn Centre, the Centre for Excellence in Aboriginal Social and Emotional Wellbeing, as well as, and very relevantly to this, being an elected member of the Victorian First Peoples Assembly. So I think, Sheree, we will continue with you, seeing I've just completed your bio, and then we'll return to Laura.
Sure, thanks Kim for that introduction, and I too would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations, where I'm dialing in from today in the Collingwood office here at VACCHO. Thanks for the opportunity, and excuse me, I feel really privileged because obviously Auntie Jill Gallagher was meant to speak on our webinar, but we have so many commitments in trying to get the message out around the referendum and the importance of this, and really trying to help the nation navigate a lot of the noise in this space. So unfortunately you don't get to hear from Auntie Jill, but we share very similar sentiments about the importance of the yes for our community. So I just wanted to share a couple of points just on my views on why I'm voting yes, and why the referendum outcome is really important for me, but also for my family and community and the work that I do in social and emotional wellbeing. So on Saturday, October the 14th, each and every Australian will have an opportunity to create their own legacy and be on the right side of the biggest moment in this nation's history. I think it's no secret that of the outcome of this referendum and the decision that this nation gets to make next Saturday, there won't be another opportunity for that in our generation. And so that's why it's really, really important for us to be able to share our knowledge and experience as Aboriginal people. So why do Aboriginal people need a voice, and why does that voice need to be enshrined in Constitution? And I think that Uncle Rod has spoke to some of those reasons of the why. We've seen a whole range of mechanisms that have been created to provide advice to the Australian government. But when that advice doesn't align with the government at the time, or people not wanting to hear what we have to say, more often than not, then those structures become dismantled. So having a voice enshrined in our Constitution will mean that that can't happen. A permanent voice, regardless of the government at time, there will still be that advice being able to provide to our government. But it's not only about providing the advice, it's about that recognition as well. And so one of the biggest reasons that I believe the voice is really important is that it will weave Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture in the fabric of our nation. It will not only be us a novelty or an interesting fact or a nice to have, but we'll see the importance, and it will be unignorable part of our past, present and future. And I often say that there's a real importance about us coming together of our shared histories of this country so that we can move forward. And I got the pleasure also, Uncle Rod, sitting amongst elders over the last couple of days, and one of our dear Gunditjmara elders, Uncle Jim Berg, and got to sit with him. And he's always instilled in us that it's really important to know where we've been, to know where we're going. And that's a really important part of us as a nation, of being able to acknowledge and recognise our histories as a shared history so we can together move forward. And this is a step in that right direction. You know, Aboriginal culture has lived on this continent for 65,000 years plus. And a constitutionally enshrined voice will make sure Aboriginal culture will never get forgotten or eradicated. And that's really important. We're a strong, resilient mob, but it's really important for us as the fabric of this nation that we are included in that. And I think for us as Australia, and when we think about what Australia is, it's more than just an England in the sun. We have this opportunity, a unique opportunity, to be able to form our own identity in that way. We have the oldest living culture in the world here, and we should be proud of it. And all Australians should be able to celebrate that. All children of Australia should grow up feeling proud of our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures in this country. The other thing that's really important amongst all of this noise for me is that Aboriginal people, the majority of Aboriginal people, want the voice. They want to be able to change outcomes for our communities. They want to be able to be heard, to be able to resolve the long-lasting impacts of colonisation on us as a community. And that constitutionally enshrined voice to Parliament was the most endorsed proposal in the regional dialogues leading up to the Uluru statement. And I think that that's really important for people to understand as well. Like, some people have an understanding that this was just something that may have been just, you know, dreamt up in the last little short time. This has been a long-standing conversation that has been well considered. There were 243 representatives at the Uluru convening discussions who put forward this as the solution. The Uluru statement calls out that this is the way forward for Aboriginal people And so I think that that's really important as well, that it's not just something that this government at time has kind of thought up and thought that this is the way that it's meant to be. It's actually been driven by Aboriginal people. And we're really, pleased that this Australian government has actually taken the full intent of the Uluru Statement of the Heart and trying to actualise that. So we all have this opportunity to be able to now move forward. And I guess the ask for us is that, there's a large majority of our population, but as mentioned earlier, we're just a small population. So we need to lean on our allies and the wider Australia to be able to make this decision for us, which is, it's a bit challenging in that way of being able to lean on our wider colleagues to be able to make a decision that's going to impact us from here going forward. So I really just believe that a voice is going to make a difference. But I think that for me also, that I just wanted to kind of share personally, when I think about the voice and the hope, that what I'm hoping for and the way forward is that I just kind of think about my own family, and I think about my own situation in that my dad was born in 1954. So he was born a non-citizen in this country. And he passed away at the age of 53, so well before his time. And he's been passed away for like a better part of 15, 16 years. But he had ticked all the boxes that colonisation has inflicted on our people. So if you think about the statistics of Aboriginal people, he died more than 20 years earlier than his non-Aboriginal equivalent. He left school at the age of 13. He was awarded the State by the age of 15, was introduced to alcohol at a very early age, and spent time incarcerated and managing many complex health issues, both physical, socially, and emotional. And so when I think about that, and I think about those experiences overlaid with trauma and racism, it's had a profound impact on his life, but also of my family's life, and something that, carries on with me and my kids and my grandchildren today. And so last year in November, I became a nan, which was very exciting. And you kind of step into this new role and responsibility of family and community. And I think, although I've spent all of my career, as my bio said, in advocating for us to be seen and heard, I wasn't able, as me as an individual, being able to change the outcome for my dad, and really was quite helpless in that way of just being able to provide love, support, as he just navigated this service system that never met his needs as a strong, sovereign Victorian Aboriginal man. And I think now we all have an opportunity to create a change. When I think about my grandbaby, but also all the future boys, the future babies, our ancestors are yet to gift us. It's so important that when we vote, that we think about our future generations and a future for those who don't have the opportunity to vote now. So we're voting for, people who don't have a voice yet, the young ones, the people who aren't even born yet. And I think that is really critical, that we think beyond the here and now and what that future holds. But for me also, as an Aboriginal person, it's really important that this part honours the many lives that we've lost along the way, our elders who have sacrificed and also fought really hard for the opportunities that we have. Like, it's amazing that we're actually having this conversation. If we kind of ignore all of the ugliness that's happening at the moment, within our social media and other things, that's really, we need to lean into the fact that we have progressed a really long way. In 1967, the referendum was about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people being counted. In 2023, this referendum is about us being heard. And I think that in that period of time, the 60 kind of odd plus from 67 referendum to here, there's been significant change. And this is a really critical step in the way forward for our people. Now I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Sheree. What a moving and inspiring engagement with something that is so personal but also so national. And your dad's story really is illustrative of so many stories that we should be hearing more and more. And as I said at the beginning, your dad shows that disjuncture. Despite being a formal citizen, he was not treated as in an equal way in ways that have had such lasting impact on generations. So that is really so valuable for us to hear firsthand, and thank you for your generosity of spirit in doing so. So now, with that fire in our belly, we'll move to our final but very welcome speaker, Laura. So over to you, Laura.
Thank you. Oh, here we go again. I've got my tissues. I haven't planned what I'm going to say. I'm just going to speak from the gut with that fire in the belly. I just want to thank Rob was actually one of my first bosses at the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service. So it's just an absolute pleasure to sit on this panel with you and Sheree, and have an enormous amount of respect for you both, and Sam as well. And I guess what I will say, it's that fire in the belly and it's that emotion. And I just want to touch on the labour of love that mob have put in. And I sit back and I listen to Sheree tell that story of her dad, and I listen to Rod share his stories, and I also have listened to mob just share and share and share and give so many reasons for non-Indigenous Australians to vote yes. And it's been absolutely exhausting and tiring. And I think right now, for the people in here who are thinking, what am I, how am I going to vote? You know, it's been difficult because we've had to expose ourselves so much and tell stories about our lives that are painful to share, in order to and talk about the deficits and the harms and awful things that have happened in our families in life, in order to convince people that they should listen to us. And that's been the emotional toll and burden of this. And essentially, we can do all this, and we don't have control of the outcome. It's what would I say? For me personally, how did I get around to voting yes? We've all got our own internal family politics, and not everyone in my family was a yes. I guess you could say, like, you know, a lot of the people in my family were a no, and along the way they've become yes. Just a quote from Mariki Onus's article that she just released yesterday. Some of those people that we mentioned earlier that were no's, that were yeses. She talks about the consequence of a no vote, and Tarneen talks about that the voice debate is an act of violence, but we're still voting yes. Yeah, so I would say what we're asking for is literally a modest ask, and we're fighting so hard for it. We're asking to be recognised, you know, for a bit of truth-telling in Australia's founding document, really, just righting the wrongs there. Just put a bit of truth-telling. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were here first, not hard. And we're asking to give advice on matters that impact us. Two simple things. And for the mob who are saying no, I get it, because they're fighting that it doesn't go far enough. I think a lot of the people that have come around and have voted yes have done so reluctantly, because what we've seen is this rise of the racist no, or racism. I'm sure a lot of you would have seen it online or felt it in person. I've done some door knocking, but I think the shock really come for me when I was at the polling booth. Yeah, go to the polling booth. I'm sure if you haven't already sensed it, you'll sense it. People saying, well, where are the no pamphlets? Or people driving their car and sort of screaming out, you know, vote no, and racist things as they drive past the polling booth. Like, this is the reality. This is the emotional toll of this debate right now. You know, I'm somewhere personally between advocating for yes but also trying to prepare for the outcome of this, whether it's a yes or a no. What is that message that we want to give the community? And for me, it's, we've had to, for someone who runs an organisation that focuses on the strength and the resilience of our mob, and it's been really hard to constantly hear us spoken about in a deficit way. And when I had and I know the black fellas on here know that as well, because that is not how we talk about ourselves at all. VACCHO, all the health promotion things, we don't. And when I had an opportunity to sort of speak about this, I said, look, if you're going to vote yes, vote for an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, because we are strong, we are storytellers, we're healers, we care about our kids more than anyone else. We know what's best for our communities more than anything else. Vote for us for these reasons too. And I went to bed that night and I thought, reflecting on what I said, I didn't think I said anything wrong. It was all about our strengths. And then something happened during the night and I thought, oh my God, what I said could potentially be used against us from the No campaign. If Laura's talking about the mob, that we've got all these strengths, then do we really need a voice? I've never, ever thought how I started to get an appreciation about the political tactics that are at play and the mistruths, and how potentially me talking about our mob in the way that I see us as being resilient could be the reason why someone might vote no. and it was the strangest thing. I thought, I hope I haven't done anything wrong by using that platform to speak about our strength and resilience. I would say that, I feel like Uncle Rod and Sheree have given you all the educational answers as to why you would vote yes and have those conversations. I guess I'm just showing you this is how it looks and feels right now in community for people. It's tough, and whether it's a yes or no, there are going to be people are going to be hurting and people are tired. We've closed our shop on Sunday just as a rest and resilience day. We've still got to run a business, but we do need to give ourselves that time. I guess finally, I'm trying to pull off a little campaign right now in a week, a bit of content, but I'd encourage you to look at it. And it uses the songs from sneak peek for you guys. I'm hoping this happens. I'm close to pulling it off. Jess Hitchcock, a Torres Strait Islander woman, she sang at the grand final, Waltzing Matilda, backup singer for Paul Kelly, but she's an awesome person. She's written this song. When I heard, I was like, I need a song, and her song is called Unbreakable. Have a listen to it. I really want to, create something that, and the last words of that song is "We'll make it." And I think at the end of all of this, mob have survived 65,000 years, and we're still going to be strong, and we're going to pull this through. The vote lies in non-Indigenous hands, and I would say, that to share some of this emotional load moving forward, the facts. I don't want to keep having to come up on here trying to be the Aboriginal person that convinces you to have that yarn, I'm tired. Is that you are the best person to influence your circle of people. So go home, you have that conversation with the people at your local sports club, at your kids' schools, with all those people in your networks. At the end of the day, like, you've heard the Aboriginal perspectives, they're on lots of platforms and podcasts, you can listen to them, but think about about supporting us right now by carrying that load and having those conversations and getting those loved ones around you to vote yes as well.
Thank you, Laura. I think the 95 people who have been privileged to hear that directly would join in thanking you for sharing your heart and soul with us. And I think the point is so profound about the toll on individuals in this process, and reflecting on the colonial project, the impact of that is a continuing one. But what I guess your message to me is about how it's not that strength is about ensuring we improve the system for everyone. And perhaps that might be a point to start opening up the questions. And the thing that I wanted to add myself in relation to just the messages what we've just heard is that mix of the deficit and the benefit aspects of what the voice and why a voice was the proposal, or how I understand it from the Uluru Dialogues, which is that a pure statement of recognition, as I said earlier, would not deal with aspects that we're both missing out on as a nation, but also in dealing with the direct disadvantage that has come from colonisation. So I think that your message sort of amplified for me that the voice has multiple purposes, and it's the multiple purposes are one, a form of recognition, so to right a wrong in terms of the structures in our society that are embedded in something as foundational as the Constitution. Two, a practical measure for when laws are being made about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, that the very people who those laws are about are involved and have a voice that improves the output of our democratic institutions. But the third point that you've mentioned, which I think is why it's important to speak of strength of mob and to remind everybody of the richness that the whole country will get by virtue of having a voice, and that when the time comes, well, both a parallel, but when the time comes when that disadvantage is gone, in the sense that we really do see a substantive output of equality for all Indigenous and non-Indigenous Australians, that we will continue through the voice to get the benefit of the 65,000 years and strength of people continuing to infuse and influence our whole nation. And in many ways, that is also consistent with the other booklet that I have, that I carry around with me, which is the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Australia is a signatory to this convention. And this convention affirms, and Australia is lacking the requirement for First Peoples, for Indigenous peoples, having a voice over the authorities that govern their lives. So that's a continuing, having the voice in our Constitution is a continuing commitment to the convention principles of this document that have been signed on to throughout the international legal framework, and which Australia is itself in deficit in relation to not fulfilling that. So the voice in that sense for me has encapsulated three purposes: the recognition, the practical way of dealing with the deficits that we see, but a protection and preservation of the continuing recognition through the benefits that we gain from the richness of 65,000 plus years of First Nations culture, belief and contribution. All right, that completes that part of our webinar, and we are lucky in the sense that we've got now another 37 minutes to be able to open it up for discussion and questions. And I really want to impress upon everyone who's participating that we really want to hear any question that you have that we may be able to answer to assist you in being as informed as possible, and to also be able to share with us things that you might have heard other people say that you're not sure what the answer is to them. So regardless of what your position is, things you've heard other people saying can also be a way of helping us assist the yes voters in the room as to how they engage with those discussions. So I know that Sam and Shelley are there with the chat function. Sam, would you like me to start with a couple of the questions that we got in advance, and then so I'll read those out, and then maybe the panelists who want to respond can do so. One of the questions has said, a lot of Australians are very unclear about what the best thing is to do. They want to do the right thing for First Nations peoples, but they've become confused. How do we provide the clarity needed for people to make a yes decision? And I might just introduce the answering, because I'm sure you've each got your own. But for me personally, it's the Uluru dialogue process that is so significant for me. We can never, ever expect any community to be universally in support of any particular matter. And so why should that expectation be on Indigenous Australians first and foremost? But secondly, this process of engaging and really discussing all the issues as communities around the country and then coming to the Uluru Dialogue was a process dealing with those different views, and over 84% of Indigenous Australians are in support of it. So for me as a non-Indigenous person, that they are aspects that are relevant to me in terms of that particular question. But I wonder if any of the others on the panel would like to say something.
Thanks, Kim. My view is that that fairness in Australia is very much approach. I think the thing that I've been talking about is the media and the political interference that has really not been transferred into that, and I think that if we sort of think about the what media does to us, we look at the American media destroys Australians' way of thinking sometimes, and that noise is really something that's powerful to some people, and it misconstrues what the real ambition is. It's about constitutional change and about recognition and about as I said, the fairness and love of country. That's what I think sometimes that people should concentrate on, rather than that noise in the background that interferes with everyone's well-being and the future of our working together and being united. Thank you.
I think it's lazy if people use that excuse now, to be honest. Of course, you're going to find a small minority. You're going to find people who don't support the voice, of course. But if you look, you'll find more people that do. That's the first thing. Don't think that's really an excuse for people to write no anymore. If you think you're voting no because some people don't want it, then vote yes because more people do. Number one. Number two, Briggs's content, Adam Briggs, or Senator Briggs, I like to call him. If you follow him on Twitter or Instagram, take 3 minutes of your life to watch this conversation he has with two white women at the pub, and he deals with this very same issue in a way that will give you a giggle and a laugh. I think humour is the way that we'll get through with it. I felt that was brilliant content from Briggs that deals exactly with this topic. Share that with your friends. Just one final thing I'd like to share was a tweet that I saw from Tani Nonis when her dad went to the polling booth. Yes. And someone said to him, it was on Gunditjmara country, they go, "Oh, I'm not going to vote yes. You're going to take my house." You know what he said? "I won't take your house, but I might take your woman." It's an absolute joke. This is the thing, it's, I think we can spend a whole lot of time trying to convince people about stuff that's true. At some point, we have to say that this is play humour into it and make a bit of fun of it and say, hey, do the work yourself.
Thank you.
I agree about that. It's really important for people to be able to navigate their own way of their decision-making processes. But Kim, you touched on a couple of things. The Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People is really critical in calling out fundamental aspects of what's best for Aboriginal people: self-determination, decision-making, respect for our culture, and free of racism and discrimination. They're kind of the 4 principles that are outlined in that document. I think that we can see and can provide abundance of evidence around the importance of Aboriginal community controlled and the benefits and the positive impacts when we are in control of our affairs. And I think that that's just in cutting through all of that. You wouldn't go and get advice from the brickie on your plumbing, or you wouldn't go and get advice from the CEO of the hospital when you're when you're pregnant and wanting to deliver your baby. So why would you go to anywhere else to get advice on what's best for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people than Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people? And I think the other thing around that is that what is occurring now is not working. So there's that part and that kind of logical part of that of we see that in the outcomes, we see that in the data, and that's because more often than not, Aboriginal people aren't in that even advisory part of what's best for them. But we can provide numerous examples of when Aboriginal people are in control of their affairs and it's worked. Look at the COVID response is a perfect example of how, given that flexibility and control to be able to, work within your community, drive programs and engagement with your community. So I agree with you, Laura, that there's plenty of examples out there of positive, ways on which when Aboriginal people have control and, being able to influence their outcomes, there's far better outcomes for us in the long run. And I think there's many examples in history as well of decisions where there has been a lot of fear and, concerns of what the outcome is going to be. The 1992 Mabo decision, like there was hype and hysteria that, mob were going to come and take your land and all of that kind of stuff. That's never happened. Never, ever happened. And it never will. Native title legislation protects that. And that's really important for people to know. The same happened when Prime Minister Rudd apologised to the stolen generation. There was, concerns around, compensation claims and those types of things. And it just hasn't, the fear and hysteria of the no or the change in those aspects are just that fear and hysteria. There have been decisions that have made such a positive impact for us as a community, and I'm hoping that come next Saturday that this is going to be another.
Okay, we've got a few questions about the nitty-gritty of the voice itself and how it will operate and at what point we will know what that will be. And that's probably a good reminder for me to actually read out for you the text of the change to the Constitution. And what we are voting on is whether we agree to this particular change. And the change is going to be a new section, section 129 of the Constitution, which is a new chapter, which I would say is a new chapter in our constitutional evolution. And the chapter is called Recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Peoples. And section 129 says that in recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first peoples of Australia, 1, there shall be a body to be called the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice. 2, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice may make representations to the Parliament and the Executive Government of the Commonwealth on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. And then 3, the Parliament shall, subject to this Constitution, have power to make laws with respect to matters relating to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander voice, including its composition, functions, powers, and structures. And this is an important time to just explain that we're dealing with constitutional change. Constitutions set up the institutions, but they don't go into the detail of the institutions for several reasons. One is because it would bulk out a constitutional document. So there's a High Court of Australia, but we don't have all of the information in this document about the composition, powers, functions, numbers in that. Rather, we have a separate piece of legislation called the Judiciary Act, which changes over time according to the needs within constitutional principles. So too with this new institution, we know that it's a body and we know that its purpose and its constitutional purpose is to make representations on matters relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So that confines what it can do constitutionally, but it gives the Parliament, our representatives in a representative democracy, the people we choose to elect to make decisions, the power to make the laws about the composition, the functions, power and procedures. So that will all happen after we choose yes. We're agreeing to a principle a principle that will be protected in the Constitution, but the actual nitty-gritty of how it will happen after. Now, that doesn't mean we have no understanding about what is, broadly speaking, expected. Indeed, the government of today has designed principles that are there, all available for us to go and have a look at voice.gov.au. The design principles include things like regional representation, include things like equal gender representation. That'll be a lead in terms of representative bodies in Australia. It includes generational change, age difference. So these are things that are guiding this government, if the referendum passes, in its what will be draft legislation to set up the voice. That draft legislation will then go into Parliament, will be fully debated in Parliament. There will be parliamentary committees. Each and every one of us can make representations to those parliamentary committees, to our representatives, about all of those elements that will be part of the legislation. It will then go into the Senate, and we know the government doesn't have the majority in the Senate, so there'll be more argy-bargy about what the actual content of the voice will be. And that is good, because that's about representative democracy and about the voice being designed for our needs here and now. And in 100 years' time, those specific needs and aspects will change. And because it's not constitutionally decided as to how it will operate, we will have the benefit of Parliament being able to update it, to fix up any problems that may evolve. So we actually have the perfect combination of the protection of the principle constitutionally, but the freedom for Parliament, which is accountable to us, to update it over time. So that's my Constitutional Law 101 answer to that question. But if any of the panelists want to add anything about their understanding of how they see the voice likely to be functioning, over to you guys. No one taking?
I would just like to say that as an elected member on the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria,
Yeah.
that I would like to see it functioning a little bit of the same on how the composition is made and whatnot. And I think that here in Victoria, it is a great example of how we are trying to implement the principles of the Uluru Statement. So voice, treaty, truth. So at the moment for us, we have our voice, which is the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria. And, you know, in its second term now, we have established a truth-telling process through Yurruk. And what comes out of that truth-telling process will help guide us with the evidence base to be able to start a negotiation with state government on what a statewide treaty would look like. And I think that that's really important, but also not to kind of confuse from a national narrative, because I think that people are getting caught up in the next steps of that, and just really kind of reiterating that this point in time, the conversation is about a voice, because otherwise, who is the government going to talk to? Like, if there isn't a voice, how are we going to kind of move forward? And I think here is a great example of, it may not be the most perfect model, but is the model that we've got, and we're working through that. And it is a representative model of voice and working together. And you know what? The world didn't stop turning when that happened. And, you know, positive, small steps going forward, because there's a big, there's a lot of time, there's a lot of challenges that we need to unpack and we need to kind of work through. And that's what agreement making is about. But it's really important, I guess, of using that as an example of this is what respectful relationships could look like. And this is the journey and pathway that we need to start somewhere. And the important part is starting with having a voice, like a representative voice.
Sheree's answer also reminded me to just also reinforce one of the other aspects of our constitution is, of course, that it is a federal system. So Sheree's mention of the First Peoples Assembly is a reminder too that this is a national voice, and each of the states have the capacity to follow Victoria's inspiring lead in terms of a voice to their respective legislative and executive branches. And this again is a Constitutional 101 point, which is that this document sets up the areas of power that the federal government can make laws on, and anything else that is not there or concurrently with the states, there are state bodies making laws. So it is really important and hopeful that each of the states will continue to follow the state lead of Victoria in also having voices to Parliament, and that they, between the state bodies and the federal voice, which will be enshrined in the Constitution, will work out mechanisms to best ensure outcomes that are truly responsive to Indigenous needs in each of the different communities.
Just quickly, just on Sheree's point that, you know, we've already got a voice in Victoria through the First Peoples Assembly, and the sky didn't fall in and lots of people don't even know about it. The second point I'd make, and it was something that Thomas Mayo said, and he said, if we had an agenda item for a meeting, the first item we'd be voting on would be, do you think in principle that we should have a voice, Indigenous people should have a voice to Parliament, yes or no? And that's the stage that we're at. And if everyone agrees yes, then the next agenda item would happen post-referendum is, what does that voice look like? So what we are voting on is a principle of should Indigenous people have a say over matters in their lives, and should we be included in the Constitution? And that detail will follow. And I think when people get caught up in, you know, for me, you're just moving through the agenda too quickly. We're not up to item 3. Right now we're on item 1. And let's stay there. Let's not overcomplicate this. Don't let that be the reason why you're not voting yes, because you don't know the detail. Because we're on agenda item 1, and the details will follow.
One of the other questions that's here that I've heard a lot and have answered a lot, and happy to start off answering again, is this question about separating out Indigenous Australians on the basis of race. And those who say that we should all be treated, that's not helpful to a democracy. So there are 2 answers to that. The first is that this separation is actually not on race. It's on recognition of First Peoples. So it's a descriptive recognition of the peoples who were here before colonisation, and how important that is, as the UN Declaration states, for that to actually exist in a foundation document. But the other aspect to this question is in relation to the powers that the federal government have under what are called the race powers. Section 51(26) of this Constitution gives the federal government power to make laws in relation to race. And in fact, the 1967 referendum was to be able to include Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples within that power. Now, interestingly, and this is another whole constitutional lecture in itself, but the whole reason why why Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people were not included at the beginning of that race power is because each of the different colonies, when they became states, wanted the power to continue to discriminate in what we now see as offensive and undermining ways Indigenous peoples in each of their colonies. And they didn't want to give up that power. They wanted to continue to have that power. And it was only in 1967, because of that desire to be able to discriminate, that the federal government took over that power, or was able to also make laws. And whilst it was intended to be beneficial, it hasn't always been beneficial. And indeed, just, you know, a not too recent example is the Northern Territory intervention legislation, which specifically overrode the Racial Discrimination Act in order to achieve the purposes that the government of that day sought. And so, in essence, the voice is a way to deal with the fact that our Constitution was created on the basis of race and distinction on the basis of race, and the voice will be a mechanism to essentially recalibrate the Constitution to enable us to overcome the clear disadvantage that has occurred by virtue of that discrimination that has occurred throughout all of Australia's colonial history.
And Kim, if we reflect back with Senator Neville Boner as one of the trailblazers, he crossed the floor because how dare you tell us what to do? That's part of the 1967 referendum. I could hear voices from my grandfather saying, "Let us change and unite together." And so we've had those conversations. People need to, and as I said, he crossed the floor to be a trailblazer, to make sure that the 1967 referendum brought people together. They're the people that we need more of. To think about how we challenging each other to, and have good positive people around that. And as I said, the past Senator Nova Peris, really strong advocate, and went on that long walk with Michael Long to Canberra to canvass this again, to reconnect and make sure that we're all, as many people as can be, are reunited to make sure that this all comes to fruition. Thanks.
Samantha, I'm looking at some of these chats, but do you want to highlight any of them for me that we haven't discussed so far? Any of the questions?
The only thing is we had a couple of questions that came through registration that I think might be worth raising. A couple of them are very similar, but talk about how do people have the conversation, like our allies, how do they have the conversation with people who are a no or on the fence? Another question, or the same type of questions have had come through registration, is how do we support First Nations people during this time? So I'm not sure if the panel would like to answer those questions.
Look, I think the positive thing is, people can talk to us, they can phone us, they can go online. We've got a number of ways of communicating. This is the power about Aboriginal people. We're open, transparent. We want to talk. We're probably the best storytellers there are. And you'll see that from today, Laura. Thanks, and Sheree. So we know the history, we know the dialogue, we know the information that's provided to us. And I'm saying don't ignore us, because we can help you, we can tell you, we can. We've fought in the streets for a long time to bring some of this together. Some of the work I do in the Koori magistrates and county courts, we're a voice for some of our people that can't navigate those systems. And as Sheree said earlier, some of our elders have been, navigating this law, LAW for a long, long time. We've the recognition that sometimes, people can, and as you say, they can do drive-bys and shout out no, but do they understand what YES stands for? It's really about change and about changing the dialogue. The other thing we talked about this morning was only two of the AFL sports football teams have come out and really acknowledged it, when they're such a powerful lobby group as well. And we just need to bring more people along in terms of the power of positive thinking, I think. Thank you.
Me too, that I've had, and I just want to state this, that I have a great appreciation for the allyship and the conversations and the work that people have been doing. They've been phone banks, door knocks, as Laura mentioned, and the handing of pamphlets at a whole range of places that you are probably all now, people in that space have probably all now experienced some of the things that we experience regularly. And so I personally, and I'm sure others on the call, would just like to kind of acknowledge that. And we are very grateful for that work and that hard work of allyship in this space. And I think those two questions around how do I have conversations with the deep no people, I think that's not where your energy needs to be focused. It needs to be focused of people who want to have genuine conversations and genuinely trying to figure this out. And that's up to you guys to be able to make that assessment on who's up for a respectful conversation and who's just entrenched in the know. So kind of pick where you need to channel your energy, because it is exhausting, and it does take a toll of trying to convince those firm no's. So I think that's really important around how to have those conversations and the information to share. And sometimes it's good, rather than kind of debating the fact, just as we have today, we're just sharing the reasons why we're voting yes. And so sharing the reasons why you're voting yes can kind of help people get along the lines. I facilitated a panel on Tuesday of elders and having the conversations, and Annie Faye Carter just said, you need to be direct and say, are you voting yes? And if not, why? So that's some advice as well from the elders. But I think just more generally that it's really important to be able to engage in those respectful conversations, because there are some pretty disrespectful conversations. And I'm hoping that that's like the loud noise, but there's a real silent majority that have made up their mind that yes is the way to go, and they've kind of disengaged in that space of being able to go to the vote already firm in knowing what's kind of helpful in that way. I think also supporting I think the other parts of that question was, how do we support mob who are having to navigate in this space as well. And I think that just that general check-in, having yarns, those types of things, being able to support and kind of getting that guide on what best works for the people that are surrounding you. Like, I think that's the best way of figuring out how can you be of best help to your Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander colleagues and peers and stuff around you, is just to have a yarn with them and say, how can we help in this process? And we'll let you know. It's like, maybe have a yarn to this person for me, because I don't want to deal with that today. Or I think one of the things for me is that I'm really grateful for that phone banking and also people door knocking, because that's something personally that I couldn't do, because it's just too much of a cultural load for me. So thinking about those types of things as well, of activity that may be hard for mob to be on the front line all the time. And so being able to step in those spaces of handing out pamphlets, engaging in your Yes 23 campaigners and those types of things are a really good way to be able to support mob.
If I could just add to that, I couldn't agree with Sheree more. I haven't done a whole lot of door knocking, but what I found great about it was seeing all the allies in it and there, and them putting as much time and effort on the line. And I know unfortunately, if we get a no vote, that I think, they will be devastated as well, and they'll feel as disappointed in this country as First Nations people, maybe not to the extent, but there will be certain disappointment. And I think our allies will rise stronger with us out of this as well, because they've experienced the hardship during this campaign period as well. Some of the tips, I guess, that we've experienced at the Clean the Grat shop, and some of the tips that we've sort of put up, like as you come in, we sort of signpost that, if you want to come into the shop, cool, you're so welcome. We love to see you wear your values. Feel free to ask our team about the size, the colour, the fit, all of those things. But if you want to ask us about our political opinion about things, if you just don't mind checking in first, that if this is something that we want to talk about right now, I think if we can just really say, hey, I've got some questions about the voice. Are you up to talking about it? And just being really like, actually, I'm done. I'm done today. Or actually, what are your questions I'm really keen to answer? I think just having some courtesy around that would be amazing and appreciated, especially in our shop space. We've had to really navigate that a lot, because my staff are on the retailer board and they're not cultural consultants yet. They're having these yarns every day. We have the other thing I'd be aware of as a non-Indigenous person is the level of your own personal emotions that you might bring to a conversation. This feels a bit awkward to say when you come in. Like, we've had lots of people come in and say, I am so sad for you, and then this is terrible, it's awful, and then they're crying, I'm a crier, but it's hard for the staff when they're feeling this too, when they have other non-Indigenous people crying to them about how they're feeling. You'd be surprised how much that actually happens. Briggs's little snip touches on that too, about it's hard for me, it must be hard for you, but it's hard for me as well. Like, I get it's hard for you, but probably not best to share that with Aboriginal people at this time. But a lovely little act of allyship that we had in the store was someone just simply dropped off some baklava. It's like, yes, just drop off some food. It was just really like easy, and it just made a huge, we didn't feel drained by that interaction. I don't know if that helps answer the questions of what that looks like, but allyship can look like, I had a little article published in The Guardian about door knocking. I didn't actually write that. I took videos of myself, and someone said, I loved your videos, you should write it. And I said, I don't have time to write it. And I said, well, what about if I write it for you? So, you know, looking, and then it was able to get, someone else knew someone that could work to get it published. So there's so many different ways that people can support First Nations people right now. And I would say often it starts with what your skill set is. So if you're a great writer, or if you've got access to, you know, you work at an advertising company, leverage your power and give us a billboard to promote something at this time. There is so much that we can do right now. And yeah, it's about tapping into what you've already got and what you can offer.
My other comment is that the road to success is always under construction, and that's what we need to think about. And don't dream it, believe in it, and your dreams will come true. So we've got to believe in what we're doing and what we're saying, and those that don't believe in us, perceive but don't be a fool, reflect on their actions and improve on their views, and just change their dialogue. Yeah, thank you.
Well, in that spirit of sharing skill sets, I might use this moment with 4 minutes left to go to share with you all that I have made an 8-part podcast series called It's Not Just the Vibe, It's the Constitution, building on that famous castle film. And I've joined with my colleague from ANU, Wiradjuri scholar James Blackwell, who's a political scientist. And the 8 parts really just unpack, it's constitutional law 101, because if we're being asked to change the constitution, it does actually help to understand how it works. And the very each of the different sessions, which look at things like representative democracy, federalism, separation of powers, the things that were relevant to the development of this idea of the voice, we weave in Indigenous material that is relevant to each of those sessions. And then in the final session, session 8, which is available, we concentrate on the voice and give 30 minutes of discussion that builds in all of the things that we've sort of touched on today, as well as the elements of the others. So I'm going to put that into the chat, and I'm sure it can also be shared later as well for those who are interested. But with only 3 minutes to go, perhaps we might give each of the panelists an opportunity to just say a few final words before we close it off for today. Perhaps in the order, yes, that we followed. Great.
Thanks, Kim, again. And look, I've just trying to put a positive spin and hope that we succeed our 80%. The challenge is, of course, is the states that are not fully behind us. You know, but really, I'm hoping for success. You know, I've got faith in where we should be. The other element of people that can't spell YES and don't know the understanding of no will be the focus of trouble for the future, in my opinion. The no means we're going nowhere, and the yes means we want to have a positive outcome of the future. Thank you.
Marie, Sheree?
My last thing of the comments, I think that I kind of mentioned it earlier, but I think that if we think about us as First Peoples of this country, and if you think about our multiculturalism and, you know, people from a whole diverse range places that make us as a nation. Don't forget that we are the first people. We were the first people. We are the first people. 65,000+ years of culture, and that wisdom of resilience and strength is only something that can be gained by this process. And I think that that's the other part of these conversations, that people feel like that they may be giving something up to include us in the Constitution, and that's not the case. You need to look at it from that strength base of what people are saying, that there's only gains in this conversation from a yes, being able to incorporate us in being able to include us, but also everything that comes with that knowledge, wisdom, ways of knowing, being and doing. There's only positives in that space for us going forward, and just and that's why I think it's really important to give us a real stand in this country. And yeah, like you, Uncle Rod, I'm really positive and really hope that the next kind of 10 days really see a real shift in the conversations for us as a nation.
I guess I've had other people share with me this, and it's this magic number that I would love you all to remember. It's the number of 2. So be loud and proud and visible in your support. So it opens you up for conversations. So then you can influence 2 people, because if you influence 2 people, then we'll win this vote. So I don't think mobs can work any harder than they are. Like, see so many that are absolutely stretched to the nth degree, putting their heart and soul into this. So now it's up to all of our allies out there, and that might, my company exists from wearing your values, but this could be as simply as posting something on your social media. So be loud and proud in your solidarity right now, because that's going to allow you to have those yarns that will make a difference.
And Steph, do you want to say a few words at the end?
Oh, just thank you for the generosity of all our speakers and panel, and Kim as well, for all of your, I was nerding out on all of that constitutional law. So thank you. I've learned so much. I'm so grateful. And I'm sure everyone on the webinar here today is filled with more information, more understanding, and hope, as I am. So thank you.
And to finish off, special thanks to you, Samantha. And, it really would not have happened if not for all of your hard work in the organising of this today. It really has been so brilliantly coordinated, and I just want to extend my sincere gratitude for the real honour of being able to facilitate this. And to encourage everybody who's participated today, if you have any further questions, Samantha has told me that if you just send an email to voice@VACCHO, VACCHO, I think she's putting it in the chat now.org.au, then she'll coordinate us being able to answer any further questions. And so without further ado, a couple of minutes late here, but thank you for those of you who have hung in there throughout the whole hour and a half. We had record numbers, and I hope this has been of real value so that you can go out and do all that you possibly can in the days remaining before the 14th of October. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Kim, and thank you to Consumer Action and you, Shelley, for all your hard work in helping get this organised. And yes, a special thank you to the panellists and for everyone for sharing your stories. We know how hard and how difficult this time is, and I know we're all pretty tired and pretty exhausted. So I acknowledge that, and thank you for taking time out of your day, an hour and a half, some of us 2 hours, to get this all together. So thank you. But yes, and to everyone who's still participating at the moment, I will send out an email with the links that were sent in the chat there, with some further resources, as well as a chance for you all to send in any further questions that you may have. We're happy to answer them. Also, apologies to some of those questions that we didn't get to. We had a lot of questions that came through registration, as well as in the chat. It's great to see those questions. It's great to have those conversations. It was quite a lot. So we'll do our best to try and answer those in an email that goes out as well after this. So thank you.